Welcome to the Azure and AI Show. This evening we have Solomon Jeremiah in the UK, and Solomon is
Hello.
going to do some stuff with VMs and stuff. And I'm going to do some Azure Kubernetes service. My name is Frank Falvey. So we'll kick off with Solomon, and we have Teresa joining us from the United States. So welcome, Teresa.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you.
Yeah,
Very good. Happy Friday.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice
Happy
to have you
Friday.
here today.
So Solomon is going to start off for us by sharing his screen.
Okay, let me just share my
While he
screen now.
started this screen, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You hold it up a bit higher.
Congrats.
We're
Your
up another small little bit.
your
Yeah.
your smile is as wide as the trophy, the award.
Yeah, it felt really good to like hold it for the first time.
Yeah.
So I would just go ahead to share my screen, and today what I'll basically do is I would try to explain the virtual machine skill set. So it's still just a continuation of my previous explanation of virtual machines. So I will share my screen now, and let me pick the screen. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So this is what I'll be talking about today, the VM skill set. Before I continue with explaining what we have today, I just want to do a recap of where we started from. I would not really go that far, but let me just get to yes. So the recap is I explained what cloud computing was, and after explaining what cloud computing was, I spoke about different models and types of cloud. And after that, we spoke about the regions. I spoke about the regions, and Frank also explained the regions for us, and he showed us an overview of what the regions look like. And then we spoke about availability zone. After talking about the availability zone, we spoke about the region pairs. Then we went ahead to talk about the Azure sovereign regions. We also covered Azure resources, and then I did a demo for the resource groups. I also did a demo for Azure subscriptions. I also spoke of management groups. Then we are right here where we are now. And last week, I was talking about the virtual machines. So today, what I'll be discussing about would be virtual machine skill set. So that's what I'll be talking about today. Last week, I spoke about the virtual machines, and we could see the way I did a demo on how we could create these virtual machines. And today, what the VM skill set is all about is it is actually built on virtual machines, right? You would probably hear people saying instance, and what it simply means is it means the virtual machine itself. But now, when we are creating this virtual machine, if we probably have a workload, and when we have this workload, we are looking for how to create multiple virtual machines, right? And when we are creating these multiple virtual machines, we don't have to probably go to the portal, create one, go back, create another one. We just want to create all at once. And then when we create all of these machines at once, we can actually choose how we want them to scale out or scale in. So now I'm going to try to explain the term scale out and scaling, right? For those that don't really understand what it means by scaling out and scaling in. So for scale out, when we are talking of scale out, is if we have an instance, which is the VM, right? And we probably want to have more of those VMs so that we can actually handle the workload. We can choose to scale out. And basically what we are doing when we scale out is we are adding more VMs. So if I probably create a VM, and when I create this VM is actually handling maybe a web app or a database, right? And if you look at the way it works, probably let's just assume we have Black Friday coming and we have like an e-commerce web application, and we know that the traffic is going to be very high during the Black Fridays. People are probably just going to be coming to see what our prices look like, and people will be trying to see how they can get like good bids and all of that. So now our workload will increase at that particular time, but we don't really know how the traffic is going to look like and how do we plan to handle this traffic. We can choose to create a VM skill set, and when we create this VM skill set, we can put it behind a load balancer, right? So I've not really explained what a load balancer is, so I'm not going to be talking much about it. But the idea is that when this traffic is coming in, if we see that the traffic is using up our CPU to a particular percentage, we can decide to scale out. We can decide to say, okay, now that our CPU is getting to 70%, 75%, let's start adding more instance. So automatically, it will create more instance for us. And if probably the Black Friday is off and probably we don't have that much traffic, and our CPU, our resources, we are no longer using that much, the number of CPU usage is going down, what would happen is that we can now scale in. So what the VM skill set will do for us, it would actually delete some of the instance that we've created. So that's what the VM skill set does for us. And now what I just explained, we can actually do this manually, and we can choose to do it automatically. We can use auto scaling, and then we can as well use the manual approach. So not to spend a lot of our time, I'll just go ahead and just do a demo to show you what it looks like, so that I can now move so that Frank can take over from here. So I would go to my Azure portal. Let me just pull it up now. Just give me a minute. I would be pulling it up now. So this is my Azure portal here. So I'm logged into my Azure portal. I can choose to just search for virtual machine skill set, right? And if I search for it, I would see, let me just type it, virtual machine. So I can choose to click on it here. Why I don't click on this is probably it will just take me to the previous VM skill set I have. So that's why I'm not clicking on this. So, but if I probably just want to create a new one, I can just search for it. And once it shows under the marketplace, I can go ahead to select the virtual machine, and then I can choose create. So when I click on create now for this virtual machine, I can choose to put it in a resource group, like I always explain, and I will just use this VMS. So I have one created so that I can easily just switch over to the one I already created and show you what I need to show you instead of waiting for this particular one to create. But I'm just going to show you how you can create this, right? So once I select the resource group, I want this machine, the virtual machine skill set to be created. I can actually give it a name. So I can say VM skill. Let me just use VM skill sets. Yeah. So if I use this, I can now put Azure AI. So let me just leave it like that. So I can choose my region, right? I choose any region. Then I would choose my availability zone. So about this, I would explain this next week, availability zone and skill set. I know I explained this earlier, but I would try to do a comparison between the availability zone and the availability set, right? So now I would just leave this as none. And then we have the orchestration here. So we have flexible and uniform. Before, if you come here, you'll probably not see this. So this is actually the legacy mode. This is the recent mode, the new orchestration mode, right? So what this does, right? When we are creating these virtual machines, we need to create identical virtual machines and use for whatsoever the workload we want to use it for, right? So that's when we go with uniform, right? But when we're using flexible, we have the opportunities to add virtual machines that are not identical. We can always add a virtual machine and we can actually make our application highly available when we are using the flexible mode. So I won't be going into much detail about the flexible mode. So I will just keep it at uniform. So for images, I'm just going to take it off that. Let me just go back, or let me just click on the drop down instead of going. So that was for my image gallery. So I'm just going to pick the image I want to install. And for the image, like I said, when I was explaining the virtual machines, you can actually use a custom image that you created, right, for the VM skill set. So I would now look at the architecture, which I explained all of this last week, and then I can choose the size of what I want, right? So I'm not going to be creating all of this, right? All of this, I will just select the size, and this is the size is correct. Okay, this is not available in the subscription I'm using. So you can always select the size you want, right? When you go to see all sizes, you can pick the size you want for your VM skill sets. I think I just went too far. So now I would just go next, and I've already created it. So now we have spots. I'm not going to be talking about the spots now. We have the digs. This is basically still part of how available you want your VM to be. Because in terms of when you're using a digs, right? If you're using the premium SSD, you always, the SLA is higher than the standard SSD, and this is also higher than the standard HDD. So this is where you have to pick that, and this is where you also need to select your network and if you want to use a load balancer. So for here, right, you can actually as well pick the instance count that you want to probably start with, and you can choose to change it to custom. So for this custom, right, you can see I can say the minimum instance I need is 1, which is like me creating one, having one minimum VM, and the maximum VM that I'll be looking at is 10. So with this, you can actually create up to 1000 VMs when you're using the virtual machine skill set. So the scale out, you can set all of these that you want in the scale out when you're using the custom. So I will show you how we can set this up after we've created this. So once we select everything we need here, we can now go to management and then click on review plus create, and then we'll create the virtual machine skill set. So the reason I'm not really going much into each of these is because I explained it last week. So I would now go into the VM skill set I have. So we just look at the VM skill set. So if you look at the VM skill set, this is the VM skill set that is actually here. And if you look at the overview of this VM skill set, you will see that it is showing 2 out of 2 succeeded. Yeah. And if I come to the instance, you would see that it is actually not running because I've actually stopped it. So I'll start this now. So when I start this now, these instances, they would be running. And when they are running, I would go to the scaling part, because this is actually where I want to explain today. I want to just explain about the scaling today. So I will just give that some time to come up. While that is coming up, I'll just click on this. So when you look at this, right, we have the manual scale. And in the manual scale, you can see that the instance count here is actually 2. And when we go to that overview, you would also see that the instance count there was 2 as well, right? So that means I can choose to increase this instance count by just coming here and saying I need 5. So if I increase this to 5 and I click on save, my instance count would increase. So if I probably just refresh and give it some time, so it's already 5 now. So it's showing me that 2 out of 5 is running. So if I probably go there now and look at the instance, you can see I have 2 running, and this is actually creating these other 3 VMs, right? And if I say, okay, I want to set how I want my VMs to scale out and scale in, I can choose to go into custom. And with custom, I can actually set rules on how I want these instances to be created, and also how I want them to be deleted. So that's what I can actually do when I'm looking at the custom auto scale. So if you look at this custom auto scale, we have the predictive auto scale. So for this predictive auto scale, I can't enable this now, because I would need to run this VM for at least 7 days so that it can use AI machine learning to understand how my skill set is working, so that it can actually start predicting when to scale out for me. I don't really need to wait. It doesn't really need to wait for the rules to take place before it starts scaling out the VMs, the instance. So if we look at forecast, what forecast is actually going to do is not going to do anything. Actually, it's just going to give you like a forecast of what should be happening at what point you need to scale out. So it will just give you like a forecast. You can actually use the forecast to see how the prediction is working before you enable it. So that's exactly what the forecast will be doing. So, but I'm not going to be using this because this VM is actually very recent. So there's nothing that I can actually do at the moment. So, but if we come down here, we'll see that we have scale based on metric, or scale to a specific instance count. So if we look at this scale based on metrics, we can see the instance is saying the minimum instance is 5. So if I probably go back there, I should be seeing my instance coming up soon. But you can see the 5 instance are actually running at this point, because the minimum instance there was showing 5. And if I come to overview and probably just refresh this should be 5 out of 5. So it was creating them. I now have 5 instances running. So when I come back to this scaling, what I can do now is I can actually set these conditions that I would use for scaling in and scaling out of this VM. So I can say my minimum count, I want it to be 2. And let me just say this default count, I'll put it at 2. And then the maximum should be 5, right? So when I set this now, what I can do, I can add rules that would decide when I want a new instance to be created or deleted. So when I look at these rules here, I can click on it. And when I click on this, what I can do is, when I look at this, I'm going to be setting rules based on the CPU percentage, right? The average CPU percentage that is being used, right? And if you look at it, it's saying the virtual machine host, and the metric that I'll be using is percentage CPU. There are different metrics I could actually use here. So we have different metrics that you can actually pick up from and use to set your scaling in and scaling out rules, right? So when I look at this and I select this, I can now come and look at this. And the condition here is that if the percentage, the metric is greater than 70%, right? That means the CPU is actually going above 70%. What should happen? So I can choose to say, okay, if the CPU is going above 75%, what you should do for me, and if this is happening for a duration of 10 minutes, that means if I'm having my CPU percentage at 75% for 10 minutes, what I would need you to do is you need to increase my CPU count by 1. Sorry, you need to increase my instance count by 1. So if these virtual machines that is running, their CPU, the percentage of their CPU is above 75%, what this is going to do, it will add one more instance to the virtual machine skill set. So, but we have something that is here, which is the cooldown. So what this cooldown does for us is just trying to control a situation where we have maybe our CPU instance, our CPU percentage over 75%, and we just keep adding more instance, right? So if it adds the first one, there's that cooldown time where it would wait, and after waiting, and then 10 minutes again, we are having the CPU at 75%, then it will add another one. So that cooldown time is just like a wait period so that it sees if everything will stabilize before trying to add another instance. So once I create this rule now, all I just need to do is click on add. So now if you look at what I just did now, I just created a rule for scale out. So, and the scale out rule is average percentage CPU greater than 75. And what it's going to do is going to increase the count. So I can add another rule, because now if I say I want to scale out my VM skill set, right? I'm adding instance. What if my instance gets to 5 and then I'm not using a lot of CPU? My CPU usage has reduced. I don't have a lot of traffic and all of that. I can't leave those machines to keep running the instances, right? I need to delete some of the instances, right? So I can add another rule that would handle that for me. So what I'm going to do, I can just leave everything the same way it is, and I'll come down here and look at this. So we have less than. So I can say if the metric is less than 50%, right? 50, right? So if it is less than 50, what do I want to do? I can leave the duration and the time going as average, but what I would be looking at now is I will be decreasing the count by 1. So we have other options here, right? You can actually just increase the count from 2 to 4 if you want to. So it's just based on what you feel you need at the moment, right? So for me, I'm increasing it by 1, but if you choose to just decrease it from whatsoever value it is to a particular value, you can do that. If you want to increase it from probably 2 to 4, you can actually say increase it to 2, the count by 2 or whatsoever. So, but now I would just do decrease the count by 1, right? So if it does that, it goes through the cooldown time, and once it goes through that, it can decide if it would decrease it by another 1. So now you can see I have my scale out and scaling set. So what I can do at this moment is I can just save this, right? So this is me using the custom auto scale for this VM skill set. So once I save this, I just need to give it some time and it will start doing its job. So once I come back here, just a few things before I go is scaling policy. So we have scaling policy, right? So these are the policies that decide how we would be deleting our machines, right? So if you look at this, what is the default policy we are using here is balance across availability zones and fault domain, then delete virtual machine with the highest instance ID. So if these policies applied, when the rule I set is trying to apply on the virtual machine skill set, what it will check for the highest instance ID. And when it is checking for the highest instance ID, it will also check for the availability zone and fault domain. That's if I use that. I didn't use that for this, but if I use that, it will check for it. So I've not really explained what the fault domain is, but basically what it's going to do is it has to confirm that my VM that is going to be deleting, probably I have VMs in different fault domain. If it wants to delete the VM, it should be looking for the VM that is probably not, let me just look for a right way to put it. Probably I have like 3 VMs, and those 3 VMs, they are in different fault domain, or we have 2 in one fault domain and we have 1 in another fault domain. If it is trying to delete, it's not going to delete the one that is staying on a different fault domain. It will probably delete 1 from the 2 that is in the same fault domain. So that's like the best way I can explain it until I explain what the fault domain is. So we also have another policy here. When it is actually trying to delete the VM, what it can do when we use this policy is going to balance it across the availability zone, then delete the newest created virtual machine. So the newest machine that was created, that's what it will delete when we use this policy. And then we have the last one where we delete the oldest created virtual machine. So we have this predictive chart. So we've not really used this. So what this would do, this is what we can actually use to get like a predictive chart of how we can scale in and scale out our virtual machines. And then we also have history here. So I've not really used this, so you'll probably not get to see any history here. So for today, this is all I just have to say about the virtual machine skill set. And because this is actually like for fundamental level, if you can understand this and probably just try to see how you create this on your test tenant, then from this level, you can now start looking at how you can use this on load balancer, how you can actually use the flexible mode and try other stuffs. And when I try to explain the availability set and availability zone, you can see how you can mix all of that to give you highly available resources when you're building your stuffs on the cloud. So I would stop here for today and I would be handing over to Frank. Thank you.
That was great, Solomon. Good demo there. Very detailed, especially on the CPU part, the scaling up, the scaling down part. Very, very good. Welcome, Sina. You're on mute.
Your mic.
One second. Let's see. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, nice to have you here.
Yeah, I wish they had emojis in StreamYard. I would have kind of given you a clap.
Just like Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. So, Sina, you're going to give us a talk sometime?
Yeah, I want to speak on Microsoft Azure, then Power Platform, then SQL Server as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do
programming. Sorry,
carry on.
No, SQL Server T-SQL programming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you let us know what week you want to do it, and
No, all Fridays we are going through this, like.
Yeah.
Friday.
Every
Friday.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do a small piece there on Azure Kubernetes service. I have a few slides, and then I'll just go into the portal, and I created the Azure Kubernetes cluster earlier because it takes some time to provision it, so you can actually see it done. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, so Azure Kubernetes Service. As you can see in the diagram there, you can use Windows, Linux, or Mac, or anything to create these containers like Docker, and you can use Kubernetes then to manage all your containers in Azure. I suppose you could think of these containers kind of like being like files and folders that you'd have on your ordinary Windows desktop for managing files and whatever. But these containers can use applications and web apps and all sorts of stuff. We'll see as we go forward. So what is Docker? So Docker is a containerization platform used to develop, ship, run containers. Docker doesn't use a hypervisor, so you can run Docker on your desktop or on your laptop. If you're deploying testing applications, the desktop version of Docker also supports Linux, Windows, Mac OS. For production systems, Docker is available for server environments, including many variants of Linux and Microsoft Windows Server 2016 and above. Many clouds, including Azure, support Docker. So we'll just kind of move on. So this is a kind of an overview of all the different services in the Azure Kubernetes services. So the one there on the left there, the containers, that's the kind of the one there where you could have your Docker containers in. So there's a lot to it, but I'm only kind of going over to do an overview of some of it. So we'll just move on to the next slide there. So it's for simplifying deployment, management, and operations of Kubernetes. Kind of focuses more on your containers rather than your infrastructure, so you kind of don't have to worry about all the VMs underneath it or anything else like that when you run it. Azure looks after all that stuff in the back end. So as you can see there, it works with open source APIs. That's how you connect to all your different containers and web apps and stuff. As Solomon was talking about there, the scaling. So this thing can scale out as well. If your applications kind of get bigger, it'll just scale up. If you're like, if you're running an online shop now, and as Solomon was saying, the time of the year will get busy, this can scale out and get bigger. So this is kind of how it actually looks and how it connects to Azure. So over on the left there, you've got your architect and your infrastructure, and it's connected to Kubernetes. You can see where Docker is kind of sitting up on top of the VMs and the storage and the stuff there. So where it says the manage control plane there, we'll see that in a minute there now when I log into the Azure portal to show you what it actually looks like in there. So if this is the easy way to get it started. If just run into, if you go into CLI, and you can see there like create your resource group, your cluster, generate your SSH keys then for logging into it, and then you can just download your install into user local bin kubectl. So it's straightforward with the code there that we're looking at. So as I say, easy run containers on Azure with a single command. So the last slide there, you see that command once you fill it out. Start using your containers straight away, cloud scale, containers capacity, and you can see there the hypervisor where it kind of sits on top of it. The Azure portal, and some people prefer to use the Azure portal rather than using the CLI command line for running the Kubernetes cluster. So that's kind of like what it looks like in the portal, and there is the other one, then the Azure container instance. Kubernetes does all the orchestration, to keep everything running smooth, and it scales out automatically. They have these kind of virtual kubelets, they call them. I'll show you there now on the next slide. So when you spin up all the VMs, Kubernetes use these things called pods, and they're used to kind of control all your containers. So as you can kind of see from the deployment there to the control panel and out to the Azure container instance. So we'll just escape out of that one, and we just go into the portal, which I have opened here. So I'll just show you how to create. So I just have to put an AKS in there, and down here in the marketplace we got Azure Kubernetes Service, and click into that one. So I've already created one of these earlier now, so I'm just going to go through the steps, and we'll go back to the one I created earlier. So here is my subscription, and Solomon was going through the resource groups there earlier, so I created one there for Frank demo. So we'll just use that one. And I'm just going to, because I'm in Northern Europe, I'm just going to use that one. And the availability zones, it gives you 3 of them. So Northern Europe is Dublin. So they've got 3 zones. So they've got one in North Dublin, one West Dublin, one South Dublin. So it's highly available. So if one of them goes down, it's on the other 2. So you're good to go with that. So up in the top, then you got the nodes. So it's got an agent here. So I set it to be between 1 and 5, like previously. So Solomon doing the VMs 1 to 5. So you can actually go in here and change that if you want. But I'll just leave it 1 to 5. The part down here, encryption. So anything at rest is encrypted on Azure. So we'll just go on. So the access then is used in authentication, authorization. So local account, Kubernetes, role-based access control. So there's other ones in there, but I'm just going to use the local one for the demonstration. So the networking then as well. Networking KubeNet, so I'm just going to leave those as defaults, and the network policy, Azure network policy, is not compatible with KubeNet networking, so we're just going to leave that as there. integration. So you got the Azure Container Registry there. I don't have that set up, so I'm just going to leave that as none. You can use Azure Monitor then as well to monitor your memory, your CPU, and all that sort of stuff, and the billing and data, and data that's going in, ingestion and retention. So down here it's got a log analytical workspace as well, so that you can keep an eye on all the stuff that's happening with it. You've got alert rules, same as what Solomon was going through there earlier. This one here is going to alert me if the percentage is greater than 80%, or if the memory working percentage is greater than 80%. So it's going to notify me by email, and I can just log back in and change stuff if I need to. So that's the integration part. Advanced part, we just won't do anything. That tags are just handy for billing and connecting different accounts to. And the last one, then, if you click that review and create, it actually will create your Kubernetes cluster. But I have one already created, so we'll just go down and have a look at that. So here I'm into the Kubernetes cluster, and as you can see, there's a lot of stuff there. We're in the overview there now at the moment, so you can see success is running, where it is Northern Europe, the subscription ID. So it's telling you the encryption type, it's encrypted. And there we have our nodes, and we're just our standard DS2 version 2 type. All right, the activity log, as there's nothing really running on this, it's just giving you when it was created, and I didn't actually load anything into it, so there's not much there. Access control. So you can grant access to different people here inside in this section, if you want to leave people kind of upload containers to your Kubernetes service and stuff like that. And there's our tags again, if you want to change some or add some more stuff as you add more containers to it, wherever. That's for diagnosing problems. So yeah, that's there's a monitoring part, and as I said, there's nothing actually running on it, so that's it. So that's a kind of an overview really of what Azure Kubernetes Service is. So any questions on that?
Thank you so much for that presentation, Frank.
Very good.
Nice presentation. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. So, any of you used Docker before?
Yeah, I used it on Linux, but that was like 2 years ago, the last time I used it for a web app.
I actually done a course on Docker before, and they gave us a book, and it's just that thick, like, so. It's files and folders. It's there is a lot of kind of stuff into the background of it, but
yeah. So I think once you are familiar with virtualization, virtual machines, containers, Dockers, Kubernetes, right? There are a lot of stuff you can actually do when you're familiar with that.
Yeah. And the scale out part is very important as well, as you were saying there, like different times of the year, different companies like accountancy firms. Now here in Ireland, I think they do it every November. They have to have their accounts back for the government and wherever. So all these accounting firms get loads of data sent into them, so they need to kind of scale out for the month of
Yeah.
November, and then after that they just scale back down again, you know, so it doesn't cost them that much money. So.
Yeah, that's actually true. So, and that's one of the beauty of using the cloud. You don't have to spend money on getting resources you don't really need over a period of time. So, because if there's no cloud, you'll probably go to buy these hardwares, and just
Yes.
because of 1 month that you need the traffic, you'll be experiencing high workload. You just get an expensive server, and sometimes you might probably use it for just that period, and the next time you'll probably be having that workload, your server is probably getting outdated, or you just need to
Yes.
start getting other stuff. So it's more like you spend more. So that's one of the beauty of the cloud.
Yeah,
Yes.
and servers are not cheap.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Never. They are not. They are not. Yeah. They are
Yeah.
not. They are actually expensive.
I worked in a place before where we used to build a private cloud, and some of the boxes like could cost $5 million for a customer, you know. So when you ship it to them, they could have something like 50 petabytes of data on it, and stats have actually shown that these big server and storage boxes, 80% of them doesn't get used at all, you know. So can you imagine that $5 million? They should have only spent 1 million, you know. So
Yeah.
they buy too much and they never use it. So the cloud is just handy. You just buy what you want. When you're finished with it, shut it down, and that's it.
Exactly. You just
So
get
that's
what
good.
you want, use
Yeah.
what you want, and pay for what you're using.
Yeah.
So you don't pay for what you don't need. So that's actually correct.
Yeah, Teresa, I see your Outlook videos that the new release came out recently.
So I'm not sure which video you're referring to, but here's an opportunity for me just to share with folks to, enable that new Outlook when you can. I wasn't scheduled to present today, but I wanted just to show this slide. Let me pull up the slide.
Sure.
Share my screen. And give me a second. Should be Windows. Here we go. You see my screen now?
Yeah.
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 So I like to just take the opportunity to encourage people end users to go ahead. If you see that, that new Outlook button, go ahead and try it. I will say in the same breath, there are some features that are missing, but there are also a lot of new features available. And, the main reason to give it a try and start using it now is you can influence change. Microsoft is open to, to feedback. So if there's a feature missing or you want to see it, behave differently, give them feedback. The main thing is you're going to retain information better, right? So instead of when they decide that you don't have the ability to go back to the classic version, because you have the ability to do that right now, that you can learn in, when you can over time, versus when they pull that plug, it's not, the classic version is not available to you. Again, just learn the new and missing features. And then I like to encourage people to share their knowledge. Whatever you learn, share it with your team, because right now, people are frustrated because some features are missing or just different or located in a different place, right? Your work behavior is just slightly different because you may have to navigate to a different area. And again, it's all about working efficiently. Because I just read all the different posts on different social media platforms. people are just really reacting and then it's just shutting down and just not giving it a chance. So, I just wanted just to remind people that there are some benefits of using the new Outlook now instead of later. So that's all I will just share with you guys today. And, between Dan and I, will keep coming back and sharing different, tools and features in the Microsoft 365 apps. So I did want to share that. But I just remember, I think I know what the video you're referring to. Let me see if I can get to it from my screen. If you, on your computers, and these are, Windows 10 or Windows 11, you may have the Mail app here that you may, it's different from the work and school applications. If you have this on your computer, come September 2024, you will not have this app. It will be the new Outlook, and they're giving people the option to start using it now for all the reasons that I just shared. But this app is no longer going to be available on the Microsoft Store, and it's going to be updated to the new Outlook come September 2024. So they're moving, heading towards the new Outlook, and 2024 will be here before you know it.
Yeah, I am actually using the new look for my official Outlook. Yeah, and I would say to me, it looks cool. I've not run into any issue for now. So, but I actually enjoy the looks, and I would say it's giving me like a touch of OA. You know the way OA looks, Outlook on the web.
Yeah.
So it's having a touch of that Outlook on the web look, and it's actually blending with my Windows 11. So I just see it like a very nice fit for my Windows 11. So, but I've not really had any issue, and I've not really tried a lot with it. But for now, I'm just fine with it.
And so, I'll go. You still see my screen?
No.
Okay. Let me pull this up. Just because I know they're for the replay, if anybody's watching. Come on. Here we go. Almost there. I'll just mention to folks that, I am staying close to, the rollouts of new features and a lot of retirement features when it comes to Outlook and new Outlook. This is my my YouTube channel, and there's a lot of content here around the new Outlook. So one of the ones, I'm reaching almost 2,000. Actually, it's more than 2,000. Which one is it? But yeah, this one is now at 7,000. So, if you're new to New Outlook and want to kind of get a feel of what's there, you could take a look at my YouTube channel at Track Creations 4E. So I know I had a few people reach out to me here recently.
Nice.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, it is.
That's amazing. So I think everybody should actually try the new Outlook, because to me, it looks actually cool. Like the design, the UI and everything is just nice. Those touch. And I'm not yet having issues in terms of looking for a particular feature, or maybe something has moved somewhere for now. But everything I'm seeing is just looking like a cleaner design, the Windows 11 kind of look and all of that. So, but I'll still be watching. This is just still testing.
Yeah. You have to remember, though, there are some folks who've been using the classic Outlook from the time that it rolled out. Like I'm one of them, right? and we are on autopilot as far as the features that we use, and now it's different, and people are reacting. I know that when I had to go to Outlook on for the web, it took me almost like 9 months to really be efficient. So that's why I keep trying to encourage people, you know, turn that button on and start to use it and go back and forth between the two. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what I actually want to add in terms of when we have like new features or new operating systems. So, what I do basically, even if I have a computer that I use for work and I don't want to install a new OS, I always have another computer where I can install maybe the new OS or the new features, because I have some people, they're actually good in tech. Like I have friends that know about computer, and they were just so okay with Windows 10 for long. They don't want to upgrade. And when I open Windows 10 and I'm opening my file explorer and adding more tab, they'll say, "How are you doing that?" I say, "No, you can't do that."
yeah.
So the Windows they've been using is now looking strange to them. Like, "Oh, are you doing that in Windows? How did you?" I said, "No, it's not in Windows 10. You can only do that in Windows 11."
It's 11.
So they actually use computer, but now it's looking strange to them because they are just avoiding, like, "Oh no, I don't want to go to Windows 11 yet. I'm still okay with my Windows 10."
Mhm.
So I always encourage people, it's good you try these new features and new looks just in case you have to use it or you need to assist someone. You don't go there and tell the person.
The one last thing that I will just add, Solomon, is when it comes to Windows 10 and Windows 11, you have to make sure that you have a computer, probably a new computer within the last 3 years, because I had a computer that it's older than 5 years, and I couldn't even, install Windows 10 on that old computer. So, keep that in mind, that you have to have a newer computer to be able to support Windows 11, because I had to buy a desktop last year because mine was too old. So keep
Yeah,
that in
that's
mind.
true. That's absolutely correct. So if you actually you're running your updates for Windows, you would get the option where they tell you
Mhm.
install Windows 11. So if you're using 6th gen, 7th gen, I think you'll probably be getting those. You'll see the updates, but they'll tell you it's not supported. The only
Mhm.
way you can probably install it is you just have to go to creator tool for Windows. You download the ISO, then you format the system. So that's how you would probably run it. But what I also noticed is that one of the system I tried that with, that was like the year or the month they released Windows 11, the battery was just draining.
Mhm.
The battery was just going off. So I don't know if they fixed that, but another way I do that most times, if I probably want to try a new feature, I just install a VM on my computer using Hyper-V and install the new OS and probably install the new, like if I want to even test this Outlook, I could install it there and just see how it looks like for some time before moving over to my main system. So that's how I do that sometimes.
Okay.
So yeah, can you see my screen there? I'm just kind of showing the kind of platform that we run alongside the show as well. It's the Microsoft Speakers Hub. So if anybody wants to post some articles, we have 1,139 followers so far. And it's been running over a year now, so you can see some of Dan's stuff there that's posted. Solomon, your post. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
And
There we go.
the newsletter should be going out next week. I'm gonna
Yeah.
there's a Canadian holiday July 1st, and then the US holiday on July the 4th. So I will post the June's newsletter, just kind of recapping, things from the Microsoft Speaker Club or Hub, out to everyone. So, and there will be a link in that as well to join us and sign up for the Microsoft Speaker Hub.
Yeah, and for the newsletter, I would say what you're doing is actually amazing. When I went through it, yeah.
Thank you.
Solomon, you nearly dropped it.
That was the happiness I had when I actually received it. I actually did a video, but I could not, post the video with the images together. Yeah, so it was actually nice, feeling it, and then the Lion King move.
Yeah. I
Very
thought that
good.
was cute.
Yeah.
So we're just up on the hour, so I'm just going to end the live broadcast. And thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back here again next Friday at the same time. And Solomon will be doing some more stuff on the Azure
Availability set.
fundamentals. Yeah. And I think we might have somebody else doing this talk for us as well, but we always have something. Dan Ray will probably be here for us next week as well. So I'm just going to end it. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Have a
Thank
good
you.